Good evening and welcome to Hometown Huddle on this Wednesday evening, July 15th, 2026. On tonight's show, we're happy to be joined by Barnesville head football coach Blake Allen. He sat down in the studio in Cadiz probably about a month ago, and we had a wonderful, extensive conversation about kind of the state of that Barnesville football program as they gear up for the 2026 campaign. And as we gear up for high school football season, it's that time of year. I will tell you right now, we've got this show on the 15th. We are doing Saturday night, late night live from Cadiz. We're back in Ohio. We're actually back in West Virginia earlier Saturday night for the 80th Rudy Mumley OVAC All-Star Football Charity Classic. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it's one of the greatest ways that you can kick off the high school football season in the Ohio Valley, and we couldn't be more excited to break that game down tonight and to recap it on Saturday night, as we've got a plethora of high school football content coming to you probably from now all the way until the beginning of December. And that's the time when, listen, people like the summertime. I prefer the wintertime. Don't get me started on what the House just passed regarding the clocks and everything else. Hopefully the Senate does the right thing. But with that being said, we will waste no further time and we will get to our interview with Barnesville head football coach Blake Allen. Hometown Huddle is pleased to be joined by Barnesville Shamrocks head football coach Blake Allen. Blake, it's a pleasure to have you in. We appreciate you taking the time to come to Cadiz on this Wednesday afternoon, and we're certainly looking forward to hearing a little bit more about the Barnesville Shamrocks program and, you know, kind of the good things that you guys have going on. I guess as we sit now in the middle of June, what is the emphasis as you are constructing your team? This is something that, as we talk with a lot of football coaches, it's a year-round thing.
Yeah.
So every phase of the offseason, it's not really an offseason, but every phase of it, it looks a little bit different. So in the middle of June, where are you right now with getting your 26 group ready to go to John Glenn in week 1?
Yeah, this time of year is really all just strength and conditioning. We really encourage our kids to be multi-sport athletes. So June is where we're still a little more flexible. We encourage the kids to, if they're playing baseball, wrestling, basketball camps, go on vacation. We really try to kind of push that. So, we usually have anywhere from 8 to 10 kids out week to week in June because they're out doing some different things with camps and vacation. I just got back from a family vacation myself.
Okay.
We think that's important. So, but the guys that are in town, they're expected to be in the weight room, and 3 times a week right now is what we're doing. We go hard for 3 times a week, just really strength and conditioning, and then once we turn in July, usually that's second middle of July, we get into mandatory camp, and that's where we really start cranking up. Everybody's there and all hands on deck. But yeah, at this point, it's just really just as much strength and conditioning as possible.
What are the numbers like heading into this season? I've noticed your program to be one of those ones with it seems like 60 guys out every year. There's always a packed sideline. How are the numbers looking in 26?
Yeah, I think we'll be a little closer to 50 than 60 this year, but we're expecting somewhere right around the low 50s, which I think last year was the highest we got. We were pushing 60, but anywhere above 50 with a D5 school right now, like you said, in this area, it feels like numbers are dwindling. So we're always happy if we're close to 50, which is where we're at. And our junior high program has been steady right around 40 the last few years too. Okay. So as long as we have that, we feel like we're going to have enough kids to keep developing and growing the program.
How much do you keep your finger on the pulse of the junior high program? Because I'm sure that Wednesday nights, first of all, you have practice on Wednesdays and then, throughout the season. And then, you'd love to go out and catch the junior high game because you want to know who you have coming up. That's, in a way, you're recruiting when you're not recruiting the hallways and things like that. So how much investment do you personally have in the junior high program?
Yeah, in season, like you said, is tough. Obviously, when they play home, we practice there. So I try to catch all the home games after we're done practicing. But really what I've done probably 5 or 6 years ago, I've started bringing the 6th and 7th graders are going to be next year, 7th and 8th, usually around March. I start bringing them in to lift a couple days a week with our high school guys.
Okay.
Because at that point, our high school guys, a lot of them are into baseball and track, so they're kind of more lifted in school, so we have a little more room. And at that age, a lot of the 6th, 7th graders are a little more free because they're kind of winter sports are finishing up, and they haven't quite picked up into their baseball and stuff. So that's been great for us. It's we'll get 35, 40 of those younger kids come and lifting with us. So it's a chance for me to get to know them, work with our high school kids. And then in June, like I said, our strength and conditioning, we actually set it up Monday, Wednesday, Friday are our varsity, and then Tuesday, Thursday, we do the same thing. We bring in junior high guys in.
Okay.
And myself and the varsity staff actually work with those guys all through June. So that's kind of what I've done. I kind of have a 3-4 month period where I really get to know those kids and work with them and try to develop them that way, and then kind of hand them off fully to our junior high staff once July comes around.
Yeah, that's got to be so important for them to kind of get they get a taste of or they at least get a sense of the kind of program that you're running at the high school level, because a lot of those guys are, of course, going to grow up and play as juniors and seniors for your high school team. And so that sense of cohesion, everything kind of being, the same flavor. And then when you get to junior high, it's not too big of a difference for you. And then likewise when they move up into high school.
Yeah, absolutely. And really when I bring those guys in, they probably get sick of me hearing say it, but I'm really more worried about them learning the culture.
Okay, yeah.
Any X's and O's. We've got 5 or 6 years to teach them the ins and the outs and stances and all the X's and O's, but it's just them, like you said, understanding what our program is about, and it's a great opportunity that they'll be, lifting with guys that have started 3 years on the varsity team. They get to see how they work and how they train and how they go about it. So, yeah, we try to teach it that way, of kind of passing down the culture and what Barnesville football is all about. So from a young age, they understand what to expect.
Well, you talk about culture and what Barnesville, this is a great segue, because I guess if you had to identify kind of the core values, I guess, of your program, and, for somebody that would be, let's say it's a freshman, maybe they've never picked up a football before, and they're walking in the hall, but you see them and you're like, you could really be a good tight end for us or whatever. What are the things that you're using to sell your program from a culture standpoint?
Yeah, I really probably sum it up. I think it was around my 3rd or 4th year. I think it was our first winning season. We started doing a thing, and we've continued it now, where before every practice, every game, it's kind of like a call and response. I ask the kids some questions. We huddle together before we break, and usually it's just simply, I ask them, what are you going to do today? And they say, my job. How are you going to do it? As hard as I can. If you mess up, no excuses. What comes first? The team. And then we repeat that back. So that's kind of what I keep coming back to with our kids. That's our culture. At the end of the day, we all have a job to do. Do your job. Do it as hard as you can. We're going to mess up from time to time. Don't make excuses. Own it. And put the team first. And if you do those 4 things, that's kind of what we try to hang our hat on. So that's kind of what we expect of our kids. Just embrace your role. And I've been really blessed that, the parents and the community, we have such a great community at Barnesville that they buy into it, that not everybody has to be the star. You find your role on the team, whether that's, starting on one side of the ball, playing special teams, being a scout team player. Everybody's got their role. Embrace that role. Do it as hard as you can and put the team first. That's kind of what we try to sell as our culture.
Well, and I feel like you would be obviously much more okay with the, the physical effort mistakes.
Yeah.
You hate a roughing the passer call, but it comes because a guy was going as hard as he can to get there.
Yeah.
And it's the false starts. It's the offsides. It's the, maybe you had the wrong, you're supposed to have deep third, but you drop into the flats and things like that it just, as a coach, have to drive you nuts, because those are the things that are mental that you're drilling into those guys Monday through Saturday every week.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're 100%. You can live with going hard mistakes. You can even a holding call. If you're trying to finish a block to the whistle, you can live with that stuff. You get a pass interference call because you were trying to make a play. You live with that. But yeah, it's the mental mistakes, the unforced errors are the ones that really irk you. That we try to avoid.
What do you think? So I guess kind of a 2-part question, but we talked with some football guys last season, and I wanted their take, and I want yours as well, as far as if you could identify one thing that you think most often wins a high school football game in the area or in general, what would that thing be? And then if you want to say that, games are lost more than they're won, what is the one thing that might lose games more often than anything else?
Yeah, I'm not going to give you any groundbreaking answer here, but we look at numbers like everybody else, and what we hang our hat on, I've got a paper I've done every year, and I show the kids first day of camp. I'll hand it to them this year. It's got, my first year was 2017, and every year all the way through until, and what I show them is rush yards per game and opponents' rush yards per game.
Oh, really? Okay.
Winning the line of scrimmage. I think in Ohio football, because once it gets later in the year, we can't predict the weather. It's going to get cold. It's going to get windy, and it's just hard to throw the ball. And we say every year, as much as teams love to open it up and spread it out, if you turn on the state finals every year, the teams that are still playing usually can line up and smack you in the mouth and run the football. So that, and then, of course, turnovers. The other one I put on there, turnover differentials. So if you're taking care of the ball, if you're winning the line of scrimmage, if you're outgaining your opponent on the ground, I think the stats would back up probably 75-80% of the time you're gonna have a good chance to win that game.
Yeah. Well, sure that not a groundbreaking answer. I think the same is true for like the Ohio State-Michigan game the last 25 years.
But that is the first time that somebody's ever said that specifically, the rushing battle, which I
Yeah.
think is interesting. I think we had a guy bring up turnovers. Another guy said, at the end of the day, talent is going to prevail.
Yeah. And we even had to take it a step further because I kind of we're getting out of the strength and conditioning phase into now. Once we get into camp, all right, now it's time to actually start installing. So now that we're sort of finishing I give them too the breakdown of how many of our linemen were 300-pound squatters and 200-pound benchers. How many of our players are, so they can see, all right, here's where we're at strength-wise. So now you put the work in, you have the strength. Now you got to carry that strength over into the X's and O's, right? So that's kind of what we look at. We got to have kids that can big and strong and can move people, and we got to win the line of scrimmage. We got to be able to stop the run, So that's what we try to hang our hat on.
I mean, so I envision you got a guy. It's the end of June. You got a guy who's squatting 290 or whatever, and they can get a little bit further because come July, August when you're installing, you're going to have to go crush a 3 technique when we're running the football.
Yeah.
And so, do you find that that kind of helps motivate your guys because look, this is what we want to end up doing as a program. Here's our core values, everything that you said culturally, but also running the football.
Yeah.
And so it kind of motivates them to get bigger and get stronger and things like that in the weight room.
I think so. And again, it all ties together. That's what we, especially for our linemen, we try to stress to them, there's going to be inevitable times that you're up against a guy 20, 30, 40 pounds bigger than you. But if you can put that work in the weight room, we always tell them, if you're getting low on your squat like you're supposed to, that's the same as your stance. If you're getting in that power position. So if I'm able to move 300, 350 pounds from that position, they're not going to face a guy more than 300, 350 pounds across from me. So you should have confidence that I can move that kid too because I've done it in the weight room. So it's kind of giving them that confidence in themselves that you can do this. You've trained for it.
Yeah. When you guys move into the install phase, I guess, of your off season, obviously, I mean, are you one of those programs? I know there are programs who, there are programs around the valley who run the same thing, and the freshmen walk in and they're like, okay, this is what we do and this is what you're going to do, and whether you like it or not, this is who we are, this is our identity. You have other teams who, based on typically teams with lower numbers, based on the the bodies that they have, they'll change things up sometimes radically. Are you guys a team that likes to keep things the same throughout the years, or is it more of a small adjustment year to year, or do you sometimes go from, okay, 1 week or 1 year we're I formation every week, the other year we're going to go empty?
Definitely not that. No, we're definitely not going to completely revamp everything. It's we have our core stuff that we do. We're a gap scheme, power running football team at our core. And that's what we like to do. That's what it goes back to, again, we want to win the line of scrimmage. So that's kind of what it's our identity. But for sure, we got to adapt our personnel. I think it was 2022. We had a bunch of sophomores that were athletic kids, not the biggest kids, playing line for us. We had a really athletic quarterback, C.J. Hannis. We went a lot more spread that year. We ran the ball more outside. We did some different things because we just didn't have the personnel to kind of move people and mash on the inside like we had before. So, but we kind of did it in a way that fit what we already know. So, I think any good coach, you got to tweak and adapt. But I don't think you ever see us, maybe, but I don't think you ever see us coming out 5 wide, chucking it 40 times a game. That's kind of not what we do. But you got to tweak and adapt your personnel for sure.
Yeah, and I feel like you guys are, I don't know if one of the few, but you guys notably use a fullback every year, and so that's important when he's got to kick out the end or whatever. When you are installing these things and maybe the freshmen, I think that's important to keep the identity of your scheme largely the same year to year, because then I think that really adds with the cohesion of the junior high program and then the sixth grade program and things like that. And so by the time they get to the high school level, I'm sure they already are somewhat familiar with that.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's important too. Especially in small towns, it's different than some of these bigger schools in the state of Ohio where, you may have 80 kids, 100 kids on a roster, and 25, 30 of them are legitimate D1 talented guys. And you're probably going to tailor your offense to fit. And the reality is schools around here, we don't have that. We have who we have. We got a smaller pool here. So we're trying to consistency, I think, is important. So the kids know what to expect, like you said, so that they can be confident. We get in the playoffs, we face some of those teams that have those 7 or 8 D1 guys, but they have confidence that, hey, we know our system and we can execute it just as well as those kids can. So I think that's important in small towns in our area to have that constant consistency.
Well, and then also playing in a league like the Buckeye 8, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is the first full year for football in the Buckeye 8.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So teams like Martins Ferry, Bel Air, Union Local, of course, they're all going to get familiar with what you guys do.
Yeah.
And so it makes it that much more imperative that you guys just, look, we're not going to change things up. They know what we're going to do.
Right.
They know what's coming at
Yeah.
them. They might not know which direction we're running, power or counter, but it makes it that much more important that we just do what we do really well.
Yeah, I think it was Peyton Manning I heard once say that when they were in their height of that run with Edgerrin James and all those guys and Marvin Harrison, they really only had 3 or 4 plays that they consistently called throughout the game, and it was kind of like teams knew what was coming, but if we got the look that we thought, it didn't really matter because we thought we could execute it at a higher level. But that's what he talked about. You don't need necessarily 50 different plays. If you're running 3 or 4 all the time that you're really, really good at, it really doesn't matter as long as you're doing it and executing it correctly.
Well, and these guys aren't. I was talking with a coach the other day. Like he and I could talk about, he and I could listen to Tom Brady or Peyton Manning break down coverages, and we could somewhat understand it. But these guys are high schoolers.
Yeah, right,
and
right.
not only that, but they've got math tests coming up on Friday before a game. They've got their English that they got to be focused in on and things like that. And so you don't want to make. I've always thought you don't want to turn your playbook into another core subject for those guys.
Yeah.
If you can keep it simple, which it sounds like you guys do. Defensively, what are your guys' kind of identity on the defensive side of the football? I say all this because I haven't had the pleasure of making it to a Barnesville game yet, and I really want to make one at Barnesville. I think I was at the Wheeling Central game last year, which turned out quite well for you guys.
Yeah.
I feel like you ended up running for nearly 300 yards as a team. I mean, it was a clinic on how to run the football. But really want to get out to one at home. But as far as defensively, what are your guys' identity on that side of the football?
Yeah, we believe at our core is a forefront. We like an even front. Our base is just old school 4-4, cover 3. But over the years, we adapt a lot. It's kind of what I was saying earlier. The game is going. You see a lot of spread. It's really hard to cover 4 or 5 receivers with only cover 3 look. You need that second safety.
Sure.
So we usually have one of our OBs is kind of a hybrid guy that can come down as a backer but also drop back into coverage. So we try to mix a lot of stuff in. And I guess going into what you were saying about simplifying, and you can't overwhelm these kids as high schoolers. They got so much going on. You have such limited time. Well, we've tried to, and giving my staff credit, I've been blessed. My brother's actually the defense coordinator, which obviously makes it great having some of you trust so much, and we talk all the time, obviously. But between him and I now, I think this is his 6th year now as our D coordinator this year. We try to identify 2 or 3 guys that mentally can handle, maybe add in some more. And we try to put some of that on them of like, hey, you're going to be the guy here we expect to be able to get us into coverages, communicate, be able to drop and move around. So you got to kind of identify those guys. We do a lot of kind of sophisticated stuff on defense, but it's not necessarily expecting all living. We don't need our nose tackle or our defensive tackle or our 3 technique to know necessarily the complex coverages on the back end, right?
Sure.
So try to identify the guys that can kind of handle it and put the onus on them. Like, hey, we trust you to be the leader here. You got to make these calls, get everybody in position, and that allows us to be a little bit more complex on defense when we need to be. But what makes that tough? Where give some teams credit last year. Independence was one for sure that they embarrassed us. Teams that get good at that tempo, no huddle, it kind of forces you to stay simple because you don't have the time. So there's always ways to combat that.
What's your background as a coach? Is it offensive, defensively?
So offensive more.
Okay.
Yeah, I played college at Muskingum. I was on the offensive side. I was a tight end. So I just kind of learned a lot more on that side. And then coming up through under Coach Kropp here at Harrison, and then I did a lot on the offensive side with him. And then actually before head coach at Barnesville, I was the OC for the first 2 years back at Barnesville before I took the head job. So
yeah. Well, that does kind of answer the question that we hadn't gotten to yet of your kind of background and story as to how you got to Barnesville. I think tight end is one of those positions where it's people don't really think about it a lot in terms of you probably learned a lot in the pass game and the run game, right? You have the knowledge. You have to have the knowledge of a receiver and the route tree and everything else, but you also need to know, how to, reach the right way and get the right block on a guy.
Yeah, as a coach, playing college as tight end was hugely beneficial, just for learning. Because during like the individual sessions, I would always go with the line to work on my blocking technique and understanding, leverage and double teams and all that stuff. But then I would go with the receivers for the passing session. So you kind of got the best of both worlds. So yeah, when it came to applying that to coaching now, I got to see a little bit of all that. So that was really nice.
As far as you mentioned, that was important for your kind of knowledge of the game, and I'm sure that's something that still helps you to this day. Are there any other things from your time, whether it's at Harrison or Muskingum or before then or after, whatever, are there any other things that stick out as to, if I didn't have this, or if this didn't happen, or if I wasn't in this position, I don't know if I would be as good a coach as I am.
Yeah, the 2 minute name.
Yeah.
I'm one of those guys that still to this day. I mean, every loss is a learning opportunity.
Okay, yeah.
And I mean, if there's any young coach that is listening or any of that, like, we don't have the answers all the time, you know. And so I always look at every opportunity. And so there's so many as a young coach. My time here at Harrison, I was only here for 3 years, but I thought it was one of the most informative times for me because it was right, and I was 23, 24, 25 years old, so still so young and learning so much. And I got to work with so many great people. As I mentioned, Coach Kropke was the coach here. He and I are still great friends to this day. Coach Valesco, the baseball coach, was on that staff.
Yeah.
We're still very good friends. Coach Hayes was on that staff. So just working with so many great people, and those experiences were great for me just to get to learn from some of those coaches that had been around. And then coming back, when I went back to Barnesville, my head coach before, he's still around as a teacher, and he actually came back on and helped me coach for a few years. Coach Luke Johnson, Coach Matt Johnson, and a lot of Johnsons in Barnesville, but he was the coach before me, and learned a lot from him. So just too many to name over the years, but yeah, I mean, I've just been really fortunate with the guys I've been around and the coaches that I got to learn under.
You're entering your 10th season as head coach, and you've got an impressive resume of winning nearly 75% of your games. And now, correct me if I'm wrong, Barnesville was your first head coaching. This is your still?
Yep.
Okay. So, I mean, and that's, a phenomenal job to have the kind of success that you guys have had. And that's also, not just a credit to you, but your staff, your players, I'm sure the administration, the community.
Yeah.
It's kind of an entire community effort there. At what point did you think that when you're a first-time head coach, we've heard coaches come in here and talk like, first-time head coach, they don't know what they're doing at some point. I think it was Coach Butler that was talking. At his time at Jewett-Scio, there are things that he did that are radically different than the way he runs the Barnesville program now. At what point do you feel like you got a firm grasp and, like, I guess, what is the furthest back that you can look at your program and still say that you ran it the same then as you do now?
Well, I'll tell you this, 100% on that first year. I can tell you we went, my first year we went 3-7. I think 6 of the losses were running clocks. We got outscored by around 350 points that year, so it didn't go well.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely. I was, I think, 28 years old at the time, and had a lot to learn. But I think to answer your question, the time that always sticks out to me that, like, okay, I think this is becoming a program now. We're starting to get there. Was I believe it was going into my 5th year. So my first year we had a group of freshmen that were really talented. We had a small roster. We knew we had a ways to go, but we were kind of building around those freshmen. And their senior year was actually COVID, unfortunately. But I believe we went 6-3 because of the weird COVID.
Yeah.
It was like 4-2 in the regular season, and we made a nice little run in the playoffs. We got to the regional semis, so it was kind of like our first real success. But we were losing a big group. That group was all they'd been kind of playing for 4 years, so everybody wasn't really sure what to expect. And it may have been here at Harrison actually. We came to a 7-on-7. It was like our first time competing against anybody. And man, our kids, they were communicating, they knew what they were doing, and it was a bunch of new starters, and we kind of didn't know what to expect, and it kind of clicked. I told the coaches, I'm like, okay, like this feels like a program now. Like these kids are paying attention. We've developed them. So that was kind of the first time and we ended up winning 10 games that year, and that was after losing, I think, 7 or 8 starters. So just the fact that the young guys had been paying attention enough that they felt comfortable when it was their time, and it's kind of just gone from there. That every year, that's the reality of high school football. You're losing kids every year. We only get them for 4 years. Yeah. We can't control that.
And you can't control who you get, who walks through the hallway.
We just don't control that. So kind of not making that excuse and kids understanding, hey, they're gone, now it's your turn. You know, we've worked with you, you know what you're doing, having that confidence. And I think that's what I've been really proud of the last few years. I've seen kids continue to step up.
I think that's why numbers are so important, because we've had, I think it was Kropka in here telling us, you have no control over who's going to move into the town and 20 years ago and then start a family, and who's going to walk through your program. But you mentioned a smaller program or a smaller size in that 2017 time. I guess what were the main things as far as your guys' ability to go out and build just the size of your roster? I mean, I have to imagine that recruiting the hallways, recruiting the community has to be a big part of that.
Yeah. Winning helps. Winning helps for sure. It definitely gets easier when you're winning games, and it's more fun, and the community gets more into it. When you're 3-7, crowd's not quite as electric and packed as it has been the last few years. But no, it's just like you said, all the things you said, just consistency, putting the work in, talking to kids, promoting it, showing them that you care about them and talking to them and try to communicate with them all the time, even outside of football season. And it just takes time and plugging away at it. But, eventually it's hard work. It's not for everybody. We tell the kids that. We get some kids that don't stick around all 4 years, because it's a lot of time, it's a lot of commitment.
Yeah.
We expect you to be putting work in the weight room year round, and but yeah, it's just putting the work in and trying to have those conversations and getting kids to buy in, and a lot of it's, I think the kids, they're a big part of it. I always tell the seniors at the end of the juniors that are going to be seniors, once we're kind of having our exit meetings, this is your team now.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it is them too. They gotta talk to their buddies, maybe some that are on the fence, that, hey, we need you.
Yeah.
Stick with it, and all this stuff, and that helps a lot too. Kids buying in and kind of spreading that word of mouth of wanting to be a part of it.
Well, winning is fun, and then I think it's also up to those seniors to also, and really anybody in your program, to sell it from a standpoint of, you're never going to have, set aside the winning and the touchdowns and everything else. You're never going to have that kind of camaraderie like you do in the locker room or on the practice field. Like when I think back to like 2019, the things that stick out to me the most are the locker room and practice.
Yeah.
Because those are the times that you really develop those connections with people.
Yeah, 100%. And honestly, now I'll have kids that have graduated, that played for me 5 or 6 years ago, and some of the kids that I had the nicest things to say and are most complimentary are ones that maybe weren't even starters. They weren't the star player, but they were just there and part of the team. And like you said, they just loved the brotherhood, the camaraderie, and the feeling that it gave them. And again, football teaches you so much discipline and accountability.
Yeah.
And, if you can succeed in football and go through a football program, it really does. That's what it did for me. I had coaches that held me accountable and I think helped me become a better person. So I try to do the same thing. My staff tries to do the same thing. We tell kids that, hey, we're going to hold you accountable.
Sure.
If we see things, we're going to call you on it. We're going to discipline you. But and I always tell them there's going to be days you go home and you might be cussing me, and I can't stand Coach Allen's always on me.
Yeah.
But the goal is, I know for me, I may have had those moments as a player, but 10 years down the road, now I look back and I'm so thankful. Like, I'm so thankful that Coach did that for me, and that's what I want for them. And I tell them that. 10 years down the road, we'll see you. Right now, you're mad at me, you hate me, but the goal is that hopefully you're a good dad, a good husband one day, and that you're looking back like, okay, well, I'm thankful that he was on me, to keep me on that path.
They'll come back down to earth at some point, and then they can meet you there.
Yeah.
What's the balance, I guess? I'm sure as coaches, this is something, and for a sport like football, I mean, because there's nothing bigger, I think, than in a state of Ohio, obviously, than football. And so there has to be a balance between, obviously you guys don't coach the same way coaches did 30 years ago.
Yeah.
But you still have to be tough on those guys because otherwise, in my opinion, it's not going to work. Like you have to have, tough, hard coaching. But how do you balance that with also making them feel like they are, they're there for a purpose and they're there to get something out of the program?
Yeah.
I remember coaches telling me all the time, like, we're cussing at you a lot, but that's not because we don't like you. It's because, we want you to do the best that you can.
Yeah.
So how do you find that balance?
Yeah, I mean, I try to approach it as you can be hard on kids as long as they know you care about them, that your heart is in it. So I think as long as you have that, it can't, as I reflect back on my time as a player, I had some coaches that kind of never really yelled or disciplined you, and sometimes they may have gotten walked over because there was no that kind of discipline in place. Sure. And then at the other times, I had coaches, especially as I got to college, that it was kind of always yelling, and you never really got the friend side. So I think you got to try to find that balance that they can't always see the mean side. You got to be able to talk to them outside of just of that setting and show them both sides that, hey, again, I do care about you beyond just the football field. And so try to do that, and I encourage my staff to do that too. That we got to be hard on them. We got to hold them accountable. Football is an intense sport.
Oh, for sure.
I tell the kids I've never been in the military. I have obviously tremendous respect, but I know they don't scream at those guys at boot camp for no reason. They don't do it just for fun.
Yeah.
They want them to be able to perform under pressure when the bullets are flying, and that's what they're trying to give that intense setting. And that's kind of what football is. It's intense out there when the bullets are flying on Friday night.
Well, and we didn't win 2 world wars by whispering poems.
Right, yeah. So there's a reason that they do that. So that's the same. That sometimes, when you're screwing up, we might jump you because we got to see how you're going to react.
Yes.
Once you're in, now you're getting thrown to the pressure cooker. Can you handle that? Because if not, you probably can't be out there in the fourth quarter Friday night. So and I kids understand that. In the moment, it's not fun, but we've all been there. Anybody that's played knows that that's part of it. But I think it's just. You try, and I'm not always perfect at it, and I try to, but I try when I am hard on a kid, I try to pull them aside and explain to them. Now that things have calmed down, or even if it's the next day, hey, I know I was on you, but I want to make sure you understand where it comes from and see if they have any questions, and so we can move forward and not, clean slate. It's a clean slate. Next days, we move on from it.
And I think you want them to not fear the coach, but you want them to fear not giving everything that they can. Because a lot of times when you're getting on a kid, it's because, you know that he could have given 10% more, but for whatever reason, you get those things in your mind, and like I'm guilty of it. Like, I did not run that go route as fast as I possibly could on that Tuesday practice in August.
Yeah. Well, and as a coach, it's a learning experience. When I took over at 28 years old. Now, I was a kid. I responded to a coach getting in my face and yelling at me. That I would get ticked off and like, man, I'm going to go and I'm going to prove him wrong, and it fired me up. But not every kid's like that.
Sure.
So it took me, I kind of then early in my career, I would coach that way all the time with everybody. I got to get on them. But I learned not every kid's like that. Some kids need to be, they need to be treated a little differently. That's how they respond. Some kids don't always respond the best to a coach, kind of screaming at them in the moment. They kind of need a minute. So that's something you got to learn too as a coach. You got to kind of know your kids. That's why it's important to build that relationship and know what they do respond to and how to try to best pull it out of them.
Yeah, and I think like the smartest thing I've ever heard when somebody said, what kind of coach are you? And then the coach says, well, who am I coaching?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
It's a big balancing act of who you're dealing with and things like that. As we move on to this upcoming 2026 season, you guys open up at John Glenn, and you guys have, as we were talking, I think a little bit before we turned everything on, a lot of the tough competition is going to come towards the back half of your season. I think you've got, if we look, we've got at Fort Fry, at Ferry, Wheeling Central, and then obviously the rivalry with Union Local. Is it the Milk Jug or the Milk Bucket? I've heard both.
Milk Bucket, I believe, for that. Yeah, Milk Bucket. They actually have one for like each sport. Okay. And they call it different things. Okay. Yeah, ours is the big one. It's the Milk Bucket. Yeah. It's a massive trophy. It's pretty heavy.
Is it? I mean, is it full right now?
No. Okay. No. It's just a big. Yeah. It's pretty neat. It's a cool thing. Yeah.
So I guess what do you make? I mean, what are the big things? Are you at this point? Again, this is the middle of June. Are you even as a staff looking ahead and scouting and seeing, okay, here's what we might want to, Bel Air does a lot of this. Here's what we're going to want to do in that matchup. And of course, a lot of familiar faces on the schedule. But how do you handle also having a lot of, I would say your four toughest opponents are all back-to-back at the end of the season?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to give you the coach answer. The number one is John Glenn. That's going to be a war for us. And that's a game I'm really excited about because we always played week one for over 50 years. It was like a traditional rivalry.
Oh, okay.
And they at one point they were D3, we were D6. We kind of grown apart a little bit. They're back to D4 now. We've been back in D5. So Coach Edmonds and I and the ADs had talked, and we just thought it was a great. We scrimmaged them the last 2 years, and it was a great time to. So that's gonna be really cool for both communities to bring that rivalry back because it was like I said, it was around 50, 55 years, and it was like almost dead even.
Okay.
So it's been a great rivalry. They're a big school. It's had a lot of success. So that's going to be a war right out of the gates. But, yeah, to answer your question, we've had Fort Fry week one who has that unique wing tee offense. So we got a lot of time to really hone in on the wing tee. So I know Coach Chuck was, I think, excited to get us back on the back half of the schedule so we didn't have that extra time because you don't see that every week.
Yeah.
With this, we've already started talking as a staff. John Glenn and Meadowbrook are our first two, and they like to do a lot of spread stuff. So we'll try to kind of map out when we get into our July camp days that, we'll try to kind of work on a lot of that stuff because that's what we're going to see early. But we'll pick and choose. Like we'll do a day where, Ferry is kind of like us. They're going to run off tackle power stuff. Yeah. So we'll pick a day where we do that. We'll pick a day where we do some wing tee for Fort Fry. So we try to kind of scatter that in with our base stuff. Like, hey, today let's throw some spread at them. Let's throw some wing tee. Let's throw some what UL is going to do at us. And then obviously once you get to August, it's all about game planning for just that opponent at that point.
Yeah, and that John Glenn, that's got to be a little bit of a homecoming for you going out to the county line.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. Yeah.
Back to your college days. And then that Ferry game, I mean, that's one of the things that's very exciting for me because, again, like you said, two similar kind of, I mean, I just can't picture anything other than two sledgehammers going at it, and that's probably what it's going to sound like when the pads are popping, but I think that one will be a big one as well.
Yeah, and like I said, Coach Kropp, I mean, I learned a lot from him. That's, the system we run is really, it goes back, I learned a lot of that from Coach Kropp. The basics of that, which he got from Coach Bruni, and that goes back to guys before him. It's kind of been passed down, this sort of the off-tackle system and the power system. So, Coach Kropp teases me all the time, and anytime we win, he's like, hey, you keep winning all these games with my system, So we have a lot of fun with each other, but it's gonna be cool, and it's actually his son's senior year. I've known his son since he was a little kid from coaching with him when I was here. So, yeah. It's one of those that we're excited about. It's gonna be interesting the week of where we don't get to be friends for a week, but but no, it'll be. They got some great players. Obviously, the running backs one of the best in the Valley. They do a great job there, so yeah, it'll be a war for sure.
I mean, I feel like they've played football like that in Martins Ferry since like the Washington administration.
Absolutely, yep.
Now, and Fort Fry is one of those places, kind of similar in my mind to Barnesville. Been down there once. Waterford's right next to it. They've got a nice like river element. I think it's the Muskingum down there, and very similar to Barnesville. And not that I wouldn't say hard to find, but you just go there and you know something's different about this place. And I think what I chalk that up to is the community and the buy-in. And again, I've never been to a Barnesville game, but that's one of the places that I want to get to so bad because from what I hear, that crowd is just ballistic every Friday night.
It's awesome. Yeah, we have a unique setting that we have our students are still standing in the end zone.
Okay.
And they're just it's a great atmosphere. Now we got the turf a few years ago. We got the new lights. I think Harrison has them now too. That can do all the different.
Yeah.
It's just a really neat. It's a great atmosphere. I would encourage you to come and check it out. But no, going back to Fort Fry, I got a tremendous amount of respect for Coach Huck. We played him, I believe, my first 5 years, and then the year before I took over, we played him a stretch of like 6 straight years, both in the regular season, and we kept running into him in the playoffs. And we got our butts kicked year in, year out. I mean, they just were on a run there. They were very, very good. But he and his program were kind of an inspiration to us. So we saw what they were doing, and we knew we had a lot of ground to close, but like you said, a school that's small, very similar type of town, and look what they were able to do. You know, and they don't do anything fancy. They're consistent. So that was something if we keep staying the course here, if we can build something consistent, get our kids to buy in, and then obviously the last few years we've been able to beat them, but we know that they're going to be hungry. We got to go back to their place, and it's going to be a war too. So,
if you could describe what I was having a conversation with somebody the other day. Harrison is the Pumpkin Festival game this season.
Yeah.
And so now somebody and I were talking about how that's really a cool talking point for, maybe media or, kind of those external factors. At the end of the day, it's still your guys in your locker room and, a faceless opponent on the other side.
Yeah.
And so it's more so I think the fans that kind of hype that up and feel the buzz of the Pumpkin Festival. But like the thing that I think is, and I really want to get to that game too. What sticks out to me is it kind of reminds me of how like OU and Texas play at the Cotton Bowl, and it's at the State Fair.
Yeah.
And so you have all of this community just, everybody's out. Everybody is now. I wish it was not so hot as it has been for the Pumpkin Festival the last few years, but at the end of September there. What are your thoughts on just, I guess, the community buy-in? Because, and I've also heard people talk about when talking about Barnesville, people either never leave, or if they do, they always come back.
Yeah.
And Barnesville people stay in Barnesville, and I think there's something different in the water down there.
Yeah, well, the Pumpkin Festival game, the reason that's so cool, especially when we're home, it's kind of unfortunate when we're away, but when we're home, that really is for a lot of people that do move away. They try to point out that's the 1 week that they will come back.
Okay, yeah.
So we get a lot of people that come back, and that's especially past players and alumni. That's their one opportunity. I always preach to kids. This is a one chance that these guys have to see this team. This is the only chance they're going to get to see the 2026. You get to show what you're all about, make them proud. Tim Moxley, I don't know if you've heard that name. He played at Ohio State. He's one of the only guys that ever, he was a big lineman that played at Ohio. He actually went to the NFL. He came back last year, first time he'd been back in like 30 years. So that's how we sell it to our kids, and that's what makes it really cool when we get that home game. But no, just the community. You're absolutely right. It's a very special place. That was my goal. Was I wanted to. My wife and I were both from there, so we eventually wanted to go back. That was always the plan. It's where our parents are both from, and it's just one of those places that it's such a community, and people have the roots there, and we raise our kids there. They have both their grandparents, or all their friends and family that they've known, and it just kind of gets passed on, and people are just so supportive, and they buy in and they support not only the football but the school and all the sports, and it makes it very unique and special. And I'm very blessed. I know not everybody has the support that we do, and it definitely makes my job a lot easier. Yeah,
it's something special down there. I think just the entire community buying into not only the football program but just the entire, and it helps when you're good.
Yeah.
And I think the entire athletic department has been on a pretty good stretch as of late. Obviously, an incredible atmosphere at Barnesville, and there's nothing like Barnesville football for the Shamrocks playing down there at home for you guys. But if you had to think of outside of Barnesville, or out of all the places that you may have coached at, or whatever the case is, what would you say has maybe been your favorite place to coach at from an atmosphere standpoint, environment, things like that?
Yeah, when I think of that, there's actually I don't think I can give you one, but a few have come to my mind, and actually this one just popped in my head. They're doing Friday nights now, but we the last year before they got the lights, we got to go to Blair on a Saturday.
Yeah.
Now it was hot, it was early, it was week 2,
Yeah.
but just growing up and always kind of seeing Barnesville and Blair had never played, but always seeing those games in the afternoon. That was just a really neat experience, and it was a big game. They were coming off a regional final. We were coming off an undefeated season, so it was just packed. That was a really neat experience on a Saturday afternoon. Going to UL Week 10 is always fun just because of the atmosphere, grass field, something
Yeah.
different than us, and so that's always cool. And then 2 other ones were atmosphere-wise. A couple years ago, we went to Hamilton Township in the regional semis against Wheelersburg. That's probably the most packed game I've
Okay.
ever seen. Our community just traveled so well. And then last year was the first time we actually went to Wheelersburg, and
Okay.
that was a really neat atmosphere. That stadium and the setup, first class, and everything's kind of set up. It's kind of isolated. Everybody's packed in there
Yeah.
together, and so that was pretty neat.
And they love what are the Pirates? They love the Pirates down there.
Oh yeah, they've been our arch nemesis. Actually, the region shifted. We're in a different region this year, so
Oh, okay.
So we'll avoid them in the region at least. But they've got a great program. They do a great job.
Yeah, because I've noticed, and I think this is just the way the regions are, but in every sport it seems like they always end up having to play somebody from around here in the valley.
Yeah,
Maybe it's just you guys so often because you guys have played so much. But
yeah, we've kind of. I mean, it's a good thing because a lot of times we're seeing them deeper in the playoffs because we're both winning. But
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they've had our number. But that was a cool experience getting to go and see that. They've got such a successful program, and the way they got things set up, that was neat.
Yeah. Well, taking it back to football at Barnesville, say somebody's coming into town for a game, like you mentioned, one of those people who might be coming back. Obviously, the Pumpkin Festival is big for that, but somebody who either is coming back or has not been to a game at Barnesville, as far as the community, where do you recommend, other than the game, where do you recommend they go if they really want to get the best experience out of Barnesville, the village?
Yeah, it depends on what you're looking for. If you want, we got several pizza places. Probably the most famous one for Barnesville is Home Pizza. People love home pizza in Barnesville, so if you've never tried that, I'd recommend that. If you're kind of coming in, you got some time with the family, the bowling alley, if you haven't been to the bowling
Okay.
alley, Chestnut Lanes, it's AJ does a great job there, and he'll take care of you. It's a really cool atmosphere the way he's got it, especially if it's early in the year. He's got a little outdoor area.
Oh, really?
That you can kind of hang out. Obviously, it gets a little colder, maybe not, but
Sure.
Yeah, and then we got plenty of restaurants and stuff too, but those are probably the 2 I would recommend.
Yeah. Now, you don't have to say anything necessarily nice, but talk about your rival. At the end of the season, the matchup with Union Local, obviously, your thoughts on kind of, what that just means for both programs and, being at the end of the season. I think there's nothing like rivalry week in high school football. And then particularly maybe your first thoughts on this year's matchup in particular.
Yeah, that's such a special game. It's one of those that how close we are.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody knows everybody.
Well, you think that, the average person thinks you guys are so similar, but I guarantee you could probably give me like 4 things right now as to why you guys are completely different. And,
Yeah.
We do things this way, they do things that way. We think our way is better, and we're
Yeah.
going to settle it on the football field.
Yeah, and they would say the same thing. Yeah, but no, it's just that's what makes it. And I always tell the kids that's what I love about Ohio Valley football. Obviously, we're trying to, continue to push in the playoffs, and we've got an opportunity to play a lot of schools from outside the area, and that's the main goal. Is we're pushing to try to go and win the whole thing. That's the ultimate goal for everybody.
Yeah.
But what makes Ohio Valley football, I think, really cool are just these rivalries. And for that one, when you do have 2 communities, I mean, we're 10 miles apart.
Yeah.
And I tell the kids all the time, you're going to see these kids, even when you're older, you're going to probably see them in the store, you're going to see them out in the
for
community.
sure.
Your kids might end up going to school together because there's so often a UL family will end up going to Barnesville
Yeah.
family will end up going to UL just because they're so close. So, and at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. And as much as fun as the playoffs and all that stuff is, there's nothing like that Week 10 game and the rivalry and the animosity and the
Yeah.
bragging rights that
Yes.
come with it. But as far as this year's matchup, again, one of the best running backs, I think 2 of the best running backs, Trey Tolliver for us and Brody Personowski for them. That's going to be a war. It's going to be a fun one. Again, it's usually we've been able to have their number the last few years because we've won the line of scrimmage. So that's what
Yeah.
we'll hang our hat on. They like to run the ball now with having the backs they do. So I'm sure they're thinking the same way. So
Yeah.
it'll probably come down to that again. If whoever protects the ball, who's more physical and who can run the ball. So
And I feel like Personowski's been playing for UL for like 10 years.
yeah,
at
you're
this
not
point.
kidding. Me too. Yeah, especially when you got a coach against him. Yeah, he's good.
30 was it the 33-15 game in the OVAC? Does that score ring a bell?
33-15.
OVAC All-Star Game, Wheeling Island Stadium, Ohio, West Virginia. I just talking about rivalries and kind of two sides going at it. Were you the coach of the Ohio side that year? Or was it the year
coached,
after?
but it was not 33 fit. We lost at the last second.
Oh, was that game? Okay.
The kid Di Lorenzo from Lindsley
Okay.
made a ridiculous run.
Yeah.
With like 10
Yes.
seconds left. I think we lost 13-9.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. We were leading until he was a heck of a player. He made everybody miss there at the end. Yeah.
So that would have been the year after, and I feel like
23.
3. Okay.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah, that was. I remember calling that game, and I think I bumped into you beforehand at one of the press
Yeah.
conferences or whatever the case was. But I mean, what did it mean for you and your staff to obviously have a chance to coach in such a game like that?
It was really cool. It was a really cool experience. The kids were awesome that whole week. Just getting to meet so many kids from different schools
Yeah.
and see the way they were able to come together. And the OVSC does a great job with that. It's a great event. So we were really excited that we got to do it. Unfortunately, it didn't end up the way we wanted. It was a heartbreaker at the end. But I told the kids after the game, 30, 40 years, nobody's going to remember who won. I played in the game. It was a great game. It was an exciting game. I think it was the year after us. I think Harrison did it. Was actually a tie. And
Yes.
I was like, that's even worse. I'd rather at least have somebody. So I think they changed the rules.
I think they added
on that
overtime,
now.
yeah.
But no, it was a really cool experience. For all of us. Yeah.
Was there that one weird play where I can't remember if it was you guys or West Virginia, but it was supposed to be a spike, but I think what had happened was because he didn't initially spike or something because of the weird rule, and so they had to rule it intentional grounding because I don't think he immediately picked it up and spiked it.
He was a shotgun. It was a Cambridge quarterback, and he'd never been under the center before. We were trying to go no huddle. We called a spike, and I think there was some confusion that our center thought he's used to just obviously under center spiking the ball, but he was always in the shotgun, so the snap didn't quite get. And
he fumbled the
snap.
snap.
He fumbled it and then tried to spike it.
And I think so. Then I don't think I saw the official ruling, but in my mind I thought, okay, so because they called intentional grounding on that.
Yeah,
and Scott Noldy and I from Channel 7, I
Yeah.
think he's now the SID at Wheeling at West Liberty, but we were talking up there. We actually kind of going back and forth. I was like, I think they called intentional grounding because spiking the ball was not the first thing that he did upon taking the snap.
So basically, he wasn't trying to throw it. We tried to argue that the running back was there next to him.
Yeah.
So that to me that was but now that you bring that up, that was another nice thing about the All-Star game. It was a great learning experience for us as a staff because that's just something. Obviously, we're under center all the time, but that kid just didn't have much experience with it, and you only have so many days. We didn't even think about, well, hey, if he's in a 2-minute, we may want to go over how to do a spike. Just not something to think about because
you have 6 days with him.
Yeah, so now something like that back with our well, okay, if our quarterback's hurt, we may want to go over these scenarios. You might have a kid that gets thrown in there that isn't used to this. So there's little things like that it helped us as a staff that just kind of seeing what other kids know, what they're comfortable with compared to what our kids were. So yeah, it was a really cool and informative experience for us.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Last thing before we get you out of here, I know obviously busy time of year for you guys, but you could say one thing, you could say 10 things, you could say 50 things. I don't necessarily care, but just speak to what you think in your mind makes high school football in Ohio and in the Ohio Valley. What makes that special?
Yeah, I could say a lot of things. I just don't think there's anything quite like going out there on Friday night in front of your hometown and your community. It's just so unique. I tell kids all the time. I got a son now that he's 10 years old. He plays basketball, baseball, football. I did the same, and I encourage our kids to play as many sports as possible, especially in a small school. I think it's important that we want our best athletes playing. As you mentioned, our wrestling team is phenomenal. Our baseball team's phenomenal. We've had a great track program. We've had some good basketball teams. We support all those teams. But I always tell, we got a youth camp coming up this Saturday, and I always tell the kids, as you're doing that, make football a priority because as much as those other sports are great, and I love playing them, there's just nothing that can match running out of that tunnel on Friday, especially like you said with our home atmosphere in front of your whole student side. It's so unique because baseball you're playing every night, basketball a lot of times you're playing in the middle of the week, and there might be other things going on. Yeah. Nothing else is going on Friday night, right? It's kind of the one show in town. You get to be the star of the town, and that's just what makes it so special. It's that community pride. Everybody is kind of in that one spot together, pulling together, cheering on the same team, and I get chills just thinking about it.
I was going to say, let's just get those leaves to fall off. Let's do it. I'm so ready for it.
I think that's what makes it just special, is especially small town schools like ours in this community that have pride, is it's so unique in that fact that everybody's there and pulling for one another.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate your time. Blake Allen, head football coach at Barnesville. Coach, we appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you guys for having me.
There you have it. Head football coach of the Barnesville Shamrocks, Blake Allen. Once again, we really appreciate him taking his time to come to Caddis and talk to us at the studio. Again, it was an incredible, lengthy conversation, and we covered a lot of what there is to talk about regarding Barnesville football in that conversation. But I wanted to give some of my thoughts right here. Obviously, I think it's no secret that I think they're going to have a pretty good season, right? I think they're going to win more games than they lose. If you look at the schedule, every game is losable because they're going to play them all. Every game is certainly winnable. It's obviously more likely that they win all of their games than it is that they lose all of their games. I think it's probably a more likely chance that you get struck. I think it's a more likely that we all get struck by lightning than it is that Barnesville goes 0-10 this season. So that's how confident I am, easily so, in the Barnesville football team this fall. You look at their season, and I kind of break it, and we talked about this a little bit with Coach Allen. You break it into two parts, kind of two halves. You have the first 6 weeks, honestly, we'll break it down here at John Glenn, at Meadowbrook. They get their home game against Bel Air for the first time in the season in week 3. Then they go back on the road to Buckeye Local on the 11th of September in World War II Memorial Stadium. Again, they should be undefeated at that point. I think they remain undefeated when they host both Monroe Central and Harrison Central. That game against the Huskies being the Pumpkin Festival game. And as I told Coach Allen, that's kind of gotten me just so juiced up because it reminds me of the good OU Texas games down at the Texas State Fair at the Cotton Bowl in Dallas. And so anytime you have, the community involvement on top of a high school football game to kind of cap it off, right? There's nothing that we love more in the Valley than that kind of environment for high school football. And it doesn't get better than football at Barnesville. But again, that's their first 6 games of the season. That is their slate all the way until the end of September. Again, I think it is very likely that they go 6-0 in that stretch. I think obviously you take everything with a grain of salt, and there are nuances to every certain situation and every certain way that this could play out. But I think if we come out of that 6-week stretch for Barnesville and they're not undefeated, then I think we have to have a little bit of a conversation because what went wrong? Is it something that was a fluke? Is it something that was exposing a flaw in their game? I think that's inevitable for any team. It's just how well can you mask that, or how well can you address that through the course of their season, whether it be coaching, whether it be talent. Every team's going to have a flaw. I just don't think the first 6 opponents are going to expose any of them for Barnesville. So I think before October, Barnesville, it's very likely, I would put it at about like 90% chance that they're undefeated all the way through September 25th when they host Harrison Central. Then you get into the meat of their schedule. It really beefs up towards the back half once you move into October, right? You got a road trip at Fort Fry. Fort Fry is going to beat the heck out of you. You're already going to have a little bit of attrition, not because of the quality of opponent, but because you've just played 6 games in a row. And so that's going to have a little bit of an effect on Barnesville. But again, you take that with a grain of salt, and it's a Fort Fry team that they were able to defeat 35-0 last season. And so, how much do you want to weigh that? You also have a big game at Martins Ferry. I think early candidate for one of the best high school football games this season in the Ohio Valley and in the Buckeye 8. You just think about the Belmont County aspect of that. Anytime you see the purple and white and the red and green on the same field, on the same court, on any kind of playing surface together, it's always going to be a big deal. And Coach Allen and Coach Kropka going head to head, it's like 2 sledgehammers, and I don't think we could be any more excited for that game. That's on the 9th of October. And so these are, again, these 4 games are games that I think they could probably go either way. We look at the next 2. They round out their regular season slate with home games against Wheeling Central, a team that they beat easily last year. I shouldn't say easily, but they beat by a wide margin, 29 points at Wheeling Central. Now they get them in Barnesville. And, that kind of teases this dynamic of high school football in Ohio versus high school football in West Virginia. You look at last season, Barnesville didn't make it out of the second round of the playoffs, yet they beat a team that went all the way and won the state championship in West Virginia. And so you have that kind of dynamic. And how much does that come into effect? on Saturday night for the OVAC game. We'll talk about that, but again, I think a good display of quality West Virginia high school football, quality Ohio high school football, two Ohio Valley foes kind of going at it on the gridiron on the 16th of October, and then everybody's favorite at the end of the year, the showdown with Union Local. There's something about rivalries in general, psychologically. There's also something about rivalries within the Buckeye 8, within the Ohio Valley, that I think is so special. And, there's hardware on the line in the form of liquid, potentially, with the milk bucket, the milk jug, whatever they call it down there. Either way, that game has always been one of my favorite rivalry games in the entire Ohio Valley. But that's kind of a brief look at the Barnesville schedule. And once again, we wish Coach Allen nothing but the best and his Shamrocks as they move into this 2026 season. So, real quick, before we move along here, I guess let's take a sip of the water before we get too ahead of ourselves here. That's good. That gives you that little Potomac punch, right? As we move along, we've got to tell you that people deal with issues and they come up all the time, and sometimes those issues reside in your spine, right? You have back problems, and there's no better way to get your back right from a chiropractic standpoint than DJ Keezy Chiropractic. All the information that you need is either in the Facebook post, in the podcast notes, in the YouTube feed, whatever the case is. You know how to get a hold of DJ Keezy, and you know how to get your back right? I should never hear anybody saying that, and I never do anyway, because I'm assuming that they've already got it taken care of. But you shouldn't have problems with your back if you need it cracked or whatever they do over there. That's where you got to go. Where will we be Saturday? The Hometown Highways Tour will be making the 4.5-hour trip across Interstate 68, an interstate that is kind of new. They wanted an alternative route from Morgantown to Cumberland, Maryland, and so they developed this interstate, and it's honestly very much a scenic drive. And so that'll take us to Morgantown, up to Washington, PA, down into where we call home, which is, of course, the Ohio Valley. And home for about 4 hours on Saturday evening will be Wheeling Island Stadium as we gear up for the 2026 OVAC All-Star Football Classic. You can't say enough about what this game means for, I guess, the gearing up of the high school football season. This is really, once you get past this game, it's a bit of a benchmark, and you know that you can start seriously counting down. People like me, I've counted down since the final whistle in Charleston, and where do they play them? In Canton, right? I've been counting down for that long. But really, once you get past this game, it's like, okay, now we know we've got about a month left for those first Thursday night openers in Ohio. I believe that's August 20th this season. And so it's a great way to open things up from that perspective. It's a great way to honor the players who have done phenomenal jobs throughout their high school careers on both sides of the coveted Ohio River. It's also a great opportunity to get the band involved. There's nothing better than a marching band when it comes to football. It's part of my reason as to why I prefer college and high school over the pros any day of the week. You get the cheerleaders involved, you get all these types of things, and they really do a nice job of playing it up and making it feel like such an important game, because it is. It's a game that's been going on for 80 years now. And once again, you've got the best in the OVAC from Ohio, the best from the OVAC in West Virginia, head-to-head on the same football field at Wheeling Island Stadium. It doesn't get any better than that. And you've got two star-studded coaching staffs. I couldn't think of a better squad to lead the Ohio side than Brett McLean and his St. Clairsville staff. Likewise, with Chris Dougherty in the Wheeling Park staff leading the West Virginia side. And so you've got this dynamic as well. Part of what I think that means for this game coming up is, I think it'll pay dividends. I think if you had McLean on the Ohio side and you had maybe a lesser coach on the West Virginia side, or the other way around, whichever way you want to look at it, I think this game would be, maybe you wouldn't be talking about such a tight point spread with your buddies, right? Because I think that's going to be an advantage. But because you have a similar quality of staff on either side, there's really no advantage. I believe they cancel out, and I think they will in this game as well. What that tells me is, listen, Coach McLean's been been coaching for a long time. He's been winning for a long time. Likewise with the Wheeling Park guys. And so, there's nothing that's necessarily going to confuse them. Now, talking back and forth with some producers, obviously we'll be behind the microphone for this game on Saturday night, 7 o'clock. If you can't make it to Wheeling Island Stadium, I think it's going to be pretty hot that night. You can always tune in. WTRF.com is where you can get it. And we're fortunate to work with the folks at Channel 7. They do a great job, as well as John Marshall, who we are just ecstatic to partner with again for this game. Talking back and forth, I feel like if you're West Virginia, there's going to be talent on the Ohio side. You also know that they're going to be a team that's looking to kind of stay true to the run game. I think by the end of the evening, Ohio believes that they'll have the players that can wear down the West Virginia side. And listen, they might not pop these 75-yard runs. They might not pop 4-yard runs. But if they can get 2, 3, 2, 4, 4, 5, 6, 2, 3, right? Like if they could just keep chipping away and wearing down that West Virginia front, then I think I think Ohio feels really good about their chances heading into the fourth quarter once the sun has set, which it does so late this time of year. And so I think for West Virginia defensively, you have to be, this is all schematics. This is players and talent aside. We'll talk about that a little bit here in a moment, but I think it's very important that, Ohio is going to show you what they're going to do. So for West Virginia, if you just read your keys and if the Wheeling Park coaching staff can coach them up on that, which I know that they can, and I know that those players are capable of playing within a system that allows them to flow to the football, but also be wise and follow the guards, follow which way the offensive line is going, and also be aware of, whatever's going to happen behind you should Ohio decide to drop back and throw it. And I think that's going to be a big deal when you look at quarterbacks like both Ian Starkey from Indian Creek, who gets a chance to play in this game, as well as Sam McLean from St. Clairsville. Both of them had incredible seasons. They actually went head-to-head in an overtime classic in Week 9 last season. It was one of the biggest games that we talked about on Hometown Huddle. And I honestly feel like both of them will play. Not only because I think they're both good enough, which is true, but I think, anytime you're dealing with an all-star environment like this, especially when one of the guys is the head coach's son, Starkey's going to get in there a little bit as well. Sam McLean will do his thing. And so both of those guys, I think, will be important. Both of those guys know how to lead an offense. I think perhaps Starkey will handle more of the running game if they decide to utilize the quarterback in that aspect. And if you get McLean out there, then, who's to say Ohio doesn't spread it 5 wide and try to throw that thing deep and manipulate coverages and whatever looks West Virginia is giving them. And so they can do all that. They can also lean on a guy like K'Juan Bryant from Steubenville, who had an incredible season. Steubenville had a great, run at the end of 2025. And so K'Juan Bryant, a guy who's going to be playing for West Liberty this fall. And so, they've also got an East Palestine running back. Now, I believe this is the first time East Palestine will be represented in the OVAC All-Star game due to their recent admission into the conference. You got Hines Ford out of Barnesville. And then if you look at some more of the skill guys, Noah Blackburn from Steubenville, Matt Evans, who I feel like has been playing at Edison for forever. He's been a playmaker for the Wildcats for a long time. He'll get an opportunity to play in this game. Lucas Shane from Martins Ferry is going to try to make a difference. Shamir Adams, an incredible basketball season. I remember that name because he came off the bench and played really good minutes defensively for Big Red in their basketball run that came to a heartbreaking end against Watterson. Likewise with the football team, and then Ryder Gaynor from Union Local, always a guy that's going to be able to beat you deep. And so it's not just this West Virginia defense against the Ohio offense. There's both sides of this thing. And so, you look at everything. Now, we mentioned the 2 quarterbacks for Ohio, but you've got a different situation on the West Virginia side. Ty Sperringer is going to be out of Brook, is going to be the quarterback for West Virginia, but I wouldn't be shocked if you see some Wildcat looks if they try to switch things up. I think typically, we call them gimmicks until they work. That's really less of a derogatory statement of what they're doing, but it's more so just an accurate descriptor of what West Virginia does. And I think that you'll see more of that from them in this game. You also have in years previous. And so I think he won't be the only guy. He's the only guy listed as a quarterback. I don't think he's going to be the only guy taking snaps behind center for West Virginia in this game, especially when they've got a guy like Cade Coronis out of Wheeling Central, an incredible state championship performance. We were down there in Charleston. It was freezing cold. It was beautiful. It was an all-around great night for Wheeling Central, not so much for Clay Battelle, but one of the best football games that I have ever been to from a high school perspective. They've got Colin Magers out of Cameron looking to make an impact. Marcus Reed from Brook. He'll be playing linebacker for the West Virginia side. Daniel Howland at Weir, also a really good pickup for Coach Dougherty and his staff. And so you just look at the star-studded talent all around, and I think a lot of the Wheeling Park guys going to make a difference for West Virginia in this game. You've also got guys out of University who I think could be important. And so it's going to be an incredible game. It's going to be something that I'll be able to call for the first time since 2024. I had last year, I had to miss the game. Some sibling of mine had some silly wedding down in the middle of nowhere, and we almost got lost in Virginia. When we took what was that? What is it? Interstate 64 down there. We had to make a little bit of a detour. Don't ask me why we did that in the middle of the night, but all around good time, and I just. The blood is flowing. I don't want to check the blood pressure right now, because with the feeling in the air with high school football season just slowly but steadily creeping up on us, it's going to be incredible. And once again, Hometown Huddle, late night live, probably 11 or so Saturday night from the studio in Cadiz. We're back home, and we'll recap this game. Probably going to be a very loose structure to the show. We'll probably try to get a co-host in there or a producer, whatever the case is. We might try to steal some Harco Media executives, if you want to call them that. That's a big word. I don't think we can call them that, but some other Harco Media people. We'll try to get them in there and break the game down and see what we can do from a live perspective. And so. We're getting back on the tracks. We're gearing up, and it's a beautiful thing as we get closer to high school football season. And, I think in future shows, what we'll have is, what are some of the best games that we saw last season? Probably for a quick segment, you can look at, what are the best games of this season? And before you know it, we'll be breaking down week 1. We'll be talking about the best players to watch. All of these things that I think, I think one of the things that's also going to be important is looking at a team and saying, okay, are they going to be better or worse than they were last season from a win total perspective? And we're going to try not to just say, Barnesville was 8-2 in the regular season last year. I think they're going to be 8-2 again. No, we can't do that. Is it more likely that they win more than 8 or less than 8? Honestly, I don't know. I think it's going to be more this season, but we'll see. We will find these things out with time. Time might not heal all things, but it might give you all the answers, and so it might not do that either. I don't really know what time has to do with any of it, but I know that time is a big topic of discussion about 5 miles away from here, and that's probably all we're allowed to say on that. All I will say is that the Senate has an opportunity to do the right thing. And with that, we will close it out here once again. We'll be back late at night, July 18th, and that's all we've got for Hometown Huddle. For everybody at Harco Media Network, I'm Drake Watson saying so long and have a great night.